Imagine a powerful politician surrounded by brutal bodyguards thinking he's untouchable at a luxury event. But what he doesn't know is that Jason Statham is there, watching everything. And when an injustice happens right in front of him, what was supposed to be a night of glory turns into a public nightmare. The senator has no idea that his mask is about to fall, and that the truth will explode right in the middle of the room. Want to know how Jason takes down the most powerful man of the night without saying a single word? Then watch until the end. And before we continue, make sure to hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another epic story like this. Now, let's get to the action. The city was taken over by the dazzling lights of high society. In a luxurious hotel in the heart of New York, the political and business elite gathered for an exclusive event. The imposing building, with its gleaming glass facade, stood out in the urban landscape like a monument to power and wealth. Luxury cars arrived one after another, and well-dressed chauffeurs opened doors for businessmen, politicians, and socialites. Inside the main hall, the atmosphere overflowed with sophistication. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting light in hypnotic patterns on the gilded walls, and elegantly arranged tables. Impeccable linen tablecloths contrasted with sparkling crystal glasses and gleaming silver cutlery. The aroma of refined dishes lingered in the air as waiters moved around with trays of champagne and delicately prepared appetizers. The soft music of a string orchestra filled the air, blending harmoniously with the murmurs of guests exchanging laughter and formal greetings. Men in impeccable suits discussed business, and women in stunning dresses displayed calculated smiles and sharp looks, always aware that every gesture could be observed and judged. Amid this atmosphere, one man stood out, someone few dared to confront. Richard Calloway, an influential senator, was surrounded by his allies and advisors, laughing loudly and toasting as if the world was at his feet. Calloway was an intimidating presence, tall and imposing, with neatly slicked back gray hair and an air of unwavering self-confidence, as if carved from stone. He spoke in a loud and firm tone, as if making sure everyone around him knew he dominated the situation. Around the senator, his bodyguards maintained a rigid and imposing posture, scanning any suspicious movement with sharp eyes. They wore dark suits, perfectly adjusted ties, and discreet earpieces. Anyone daring to get too close was quickly discouraged by a cold, intimidating look. They knew their job was not just to protect the politician, but to ensure that he felt like the king of that environment. But that night something would slip out of Calloway's control. In the back of the hall, discreetly seated at a distant table, was Jason Statham. Unlike the other guests, he didn't flaunt luxury or forced friendliness. He wore a simple dark jacket, but his upright posture and attentive gaze made it clear he wasn't an ordinary man. He adjusted his collar with a calm movement and observed everything around him with a restless calmness, like a predator analyzing his surroundings. Jason wasn't there for speeches or celebrations. There was something rotten about that event, and he knew the senator was at the center of it. Rumors had spread that Calloway was using his political position to protect illegal schemes, diverting public funds, and partnering with criminal groups that kept the city under control through fear. Jason despised corruption, and that night, he was there to watch and act if necessary. Then something caught his attention. Amid the hollow chatter and false promises of a prosperous future, a muffled sound of breaking glass disrupted the hall's tranquility. Jason narrowed his eyes, his sharp senses tracking the origin of the commotion. A young waiter was sprawled on the floor, shards of glasses scattered around him. His expression was one of panic, wide eyes trying to gather the crystal fragments with trembling hands. Before he could get up, one of Calloway's bodyguards grabbed him by the collar and lifted him brutally, as if the boy were nothing but crumpled paper. The crowd briefly glanced over but soon returned to their conversations and laughter, as if that scene had no importance. The senator, noticing the disturbance, merely gestured for them to remove the boy. To him, it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience, something that shouldn't interrupt his glorious night. The bodyguard dragged the waiter out of the hall with force, pulling him through the corridors as if he were a criminal. The senator, noticing the disturbance, merely gestured for them to remove the boy. To him, it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience, something that shouldn't interrupt his glorious night. The bodyguard dragged the waiter out of the hall with force, pulling him through the corridors as if he were a criminal. Jason remained still for a moment, but his expression hardened. His eyes followed the path of the bodyguard and the young man, noticing how no one seemed to care. It was as if the elite gathered there were anesthetized to injustice, ignoring any action that didn't fit the perfection of that environment. Senator Calloway continued his speech, praising his projects and talking about honesty and commitment to the people, while his authoritarian stance remained unshaken. The audience applauded mechanically, as if hypnotized by his presence, without realizing the corruption hidden behind his rehearsed smile. Jason slowly stood up, adjusting his jacket and placing some bills on the table. His gaze grew colder than before, and his steps, though quiet, carried a calculated weight. He knew that what he was about to do wouldn't go unnoticed, but he had already decided not to let it continue. He walked to the exit, opening the door firmly and decisively. The corridor was deserted except for the muffled sound coming from the back. He followed the noise to a dimly lit service area, where the bodyguard was still pressing the young man against the wall, spewing insults and threats with a rough, contemptuous voice. At the back of the hotel, far from the attentive and curious eyes of the guests, Jason found exactly what he expected. The service area was a stark contrast to the luxury of the main hall. The dimly lit corridor had peeling walls, and the damp concrete floor reflected the faint light escaping from a flickering bulb. The smell of mold mixed with kitchen residue created a heavy and suffocating atmosphere. The waiter was lying on the floor, struggling to stay conscious, his face bloodied and his gaze lost. His breathing came in short, painful gasps, his trembling hands trying to support himself against the wall. A small pool of blood had already formed under his head, and he seemed on the verge of passing out. The security guard, a tall and robust man, stood in front of him, his fists still clenched and his eyes fixed on the victim, as if savoring his dirty work. His posture was pure pride, his chest puffed out and his jaw clenched, like a guard dog that had just completed its mission. He didn't even worry about the possibility of someone seeing what he was doing. After all, in that territory, he was the predator. Jason stood there for a moment, motionless at the narrow corridor entrance. His shadow cast on the wall caused a subtle movement that caught the guard's attention. The man turned around quickly and froze upon seeing Jason observing the scene. His arrogant look intensified as if he couldn't stand the idea of being confronted. A cold, confident smile appeared on his lips, loaded with disdain. The guard took a step forward, his body tense, muscles bulging under his tight shirt. He measured Jason with his eyes, underestimating the seemingly calm figure standing before him. Statham's presence seemed like a silent challenge, and that deeply irritated him. But before he could react, Jason moved. The strike was fast and precise. His fist connected with the guard's stomach with a crushing force, the impact making a muffled sound that echoed through the corridor. The man bent forward, the air escaping his lungs in a hoarse groan. Without giving him time to react, Jason slid to the side and delivered a precise kick to the side of the guard's knee, making the joint give way with a dry crack. The man's body collapsed like a demolished building, falling heavily to the ground. He tried to get up, but Jason stepped on his hand, pressing firmly against the cold concrete. The guard grimaced in pain, trying to free his trapped hand, but Jason's weight didn't give an inch. Jason kept his gaze fixed, showing no emotion. His body remained relaxed as if the effort required was minimal. The guard panted, trying to find some way to break free, but he knew it was impossible. The feeling of helplessness was even more painful than the previous blows. The silence was broken by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching quickly. Two other guards appeared from the side of the hotel, alerted by the noise of the fall and the moans of pain. Their hardened expressions and aggressive postures made it clear they weren't there to ask questions. They just advanced like machines programmed to eliminate any threat. Jason was already prepared. The first guard tried a direct punch, but Jason dodged with a quick and precise movement, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it brutally. The crack of the dislocated bone was followed by a muffled scream, and the man fell to his knees, clutching his useless arm. The second guard attempted to attack from behind, but Jason spun his body in a fluid motion, delivering a precise side kick to the man's chest. The impact was so strong that the guard was thrown against the concrete wall, hitting his back and sliding to the floor, stunned and powerless to react. The third guard, still on the ground, tried to get up, but Jason grabbed him by the collar and lifted him partially, leaving him to support his own weight precariously. The man's eyes were wide, now filled with fear. His previously arrogant posture had turned into pure despair. Jason knew that this kind of man only understood one language: fear. So he approached slowly, keeping his gaze firm and penetrating. The hand holding the man didn't tremble, didn't hesitate. It was as firm as steel. The man tried to avert his eyes, but Jason forced him to face the truth. In a calm and controlled tone, his face conveyed a clear message. He wasn't there to negotiate. The guard, still gasping from pain and shock, stammered a few words, trying to beg for mercy, but Jason remained absolutely silent. The man realized he had no choice and began to speak. The words spilled out quickly and desperately, revealing everything he knew. Calloway wasn't just a corrupt politician. He controlled the local police and used his influence to guarantee protection for traffickers and mobsters. It was a complex information trafficking scheme, where confidential data was sold to criminal groups that ensured his re-election. Anyone who threatened to expose the scheme simply disappeared, as if they had never existed. Jason released the man's collar, letting him collapse to the ground like a broken doll. His gaze was now distant, processing all the information. He knew it was bigger than he imagined, but he didn't hesitate. His next step was already decided. He adjusted his jacket, casting one last glance at the three men lying on the ground. He knew they no longer posed a threat. They were not the kind to come back seeking revenge, not after what had just happened. He took a deep breath and walked out of the alley, stepping between the sprawled bodies with the same calm as someone crossing an empty street. His footsteps echoed through the narrow corridor as he made his way back to the main hall. But this time he wouldn't enter as just a spectator. The game had changed. He knew that facing a man like Calloway wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to do whatever it took to bring down that empire of corruption. The night was far from over, and Jason wouldn't let the truth be silenced. The hotel hall was still packed. The atmosphere pulsed with the energy of high society, important people exchanging formal greetings and empty promises while the glow of chandeliers reflected on the crystal glasses raised in effusive toasts. The aroma of refined dishes floated in the air, blending with the sound of the orchestra playing softly in the background, creating an atmosphere of false harmony and elegance. At the center of the stage, elevated above the crowd, stood Senator Richard Calloway, gripping a microphone firmly. His posture was confident, shoulders raised and chest puffed out, as if he were the very symbol of integrity and power. He spoke eloquently, making promises of a better future, boasting about his supposed efforts to combat crime and promote social progress. The audience listened attentively, some even applauding at strategic points, as he wielded his words with theatrical skill. He spoke eloquently, making promises of a better future, boasting about his supposed efforts to combat crime and promote social progress. The audience listened attentively, some even applauding at strategic points, as he wielded his words with theatrical skill. Calloway gestured with one hand while holding the microphone with the other, his firm and authoritative voice echoing throughout the hall. Journalists in the front row snapped endless photos, capturing every calculated expression of charisma. The senator smiled between phrases, making it seem as though his sincerity was beyond question. But then suddenly, the double doors of the hall burst open with force, creating a thunderous bang that echoed like muffled thunder. The music abruptly ceased, and every head turned toward the entrance. Jason walked in. His gaze was cold and determined, his steps firm and controlled, crossing the room with a presence that dominated the entire hall. He didn't care about the surprised and confused looks following him, nor the murmurs that began to spread like a restless wave among the guests. He walked between the luxurious tables, ignoring the whispers of curiosity and fear, as if he were alone in that place. The senator saw him. For a brief moment his face paled, his rigid posture faltered, and he gripped the microphone tighter, as if that object could protect him. But then quickly he regained his composure, straightening his shoulders and forcing a smile, as if trying to demonstrate control of the situation. Jason stopped in front of the stage in complete silence. The senator forced a friendly smile, pretending to ignore the tension forming around him. He tried to maintain his lofty posture, but his eyes betrayed a growing unease. Without saying a single word, Jason turned slightly and made a subtle hand gesture. Behind him, two guards who had remained at the entrance pulled back a large velvet curtain, revealing a shocking scene. The defeated bodyguards. 3 men unconscious sprawled on the floor like broken puppets. Their clothes were dirty and crumpled with visible bloodstains on their faces. Some guests let out muffled gasps, and a few women covered their mouths, shocked by the brutality of the scene. The crowd fell into complete silence as if time had stopped. Some rose from their chairs trying to comprehend what they were seeing. The perplexed glances alternated between the injured men and Jason, who remained motionless, unshaken, as if that display was the most natural thing in the world. The senator took a step back, trying to maintain a firm expression, but he couldn't hide the fear overtaking his body. His smile vanished, and the microphone trembled slightly in his hand. He looked around, hoping someone would intervene. One of his allies would take action, but no one moved. Everyone remained frozen by the tension dominating the hall. Jason kept his eyes fixed on the senator, making it clear that his authority at that moment meant nothing. The senator began to stammer a few words, trying to resume his speech, but nothing coherent came out of his mouth. It was as if his mask of power had been ripped off in front of everyone. Suddenly, one of the journalists in the audience realized that this was a unique opportunity and began taking pictures frantically. The flash from the cameras lit up Calloway's confused face and Jason's imposing presence. Other reporters quickly followed suit, capturing every detail of the scene. Questions started to arise amid the chaos, voices overlapping as they demanded explanations about the connection between the senator and the fallen men. Jason remained still, watching the public downfall of the man who, just minutes earlier, had been speaking with so much confidence. He knew he didn't need to say anything because the truth was already laid bare. The journalists demanded answers, and the audience murmured louder and louder, demanding explanations. Calloway tried to come up with an excuse, but the pressure was overwhelming. His face turned red, eyes widened, and he could barely keep himself standing. The cameras didn't stop capturing the senator's despair, and the flashes kept illuminating his face with increasingly desperate expressions. The people around were already murmuring about corruption, scandals, and violent bodyguards. The news was beginning to spread, and within minutes what was happening there would already be circulating on the internet. Jason cast one last look at Calloway, making it clear that his downfall had begun. Without haste, he turned and walked toward the exit, once again crossing the hall now filled with chaos. No one dared to stop him. Some even made way, still processing what had just happened. As he crossed the door to the outside, Jason felt the fresh night air again, breathing deeply. He knew that from that moment on, Calloway's empire would begin to crumble. His political alliances would fall apart, and the criminal groups that supported him would soon abandon him. Jason disappeared into the darkness of the New York streets, leaving behind a man who until then believed himself untouchable. That night, an empire of corruption began to fall. And Jason didn't even need to throw a single punch to take down the real villain. What does this story teach us? That the truly powerful are not those who shout the loudest, who have the most money or influence, but rather those who know exactly when to act. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like to support the channel and ensure more epic content like this. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen someone put in their place like this before? Have you ever been in a similar situation? Comment down below and share your story. And of course, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another exciting story like this. See you next time.